Hi, and thanks for coming. My name is Sarah Faulkner, and I'm with one of the groups who helped organize this event. We're called the Certain Days Freedom for Political Prisoners calendar. I really encourage you at the end of tonight, on your way out, to take a look at the calendar. The theme this year is the legacy of the Panthers. We're selling $15. It's a fundraiser, and it has lots of beautiful art by political prisoners, by their supporters, including a really great piece by Professor Churchill. Many of the political prisoners featured in the calendar were anti-war and anti-imperialist activists in the 60s and 70s, and many of them have been in prison since then for over 30 years. The theme, as I said, is Legacy of the Panthers, and the bulk of our proceeds will go to the San Francisco 8, a group of former Black Panthers who are facing charges related to a murder that's over 35 years old, based on a confession extracted by torture. These accusations originated in a time that the FBI was engaged in an illegal campaign to destroy the Black liberation movement. And it's no coincidence at all that they're resurfacing now with the current political climate in the United States, which is one of the things that we've come here to talk about tonight. A political climate that has made it possible once again to persecute people for unpopular ideas. Ward Churchill has played a role in developing the ideas and the historical analysis that have propelled the social justice movement forward. He's a professor of ethnic studies at the University of Colorado from 1990 until this year. He was a national spokesperson for the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee and is a leader of the Colorado chapter of the American Indian Movement. Of course, he's not employed by the university anymore, but I can't imagine that he'll ever stop teaching. Please help me welcome Professor Ward Churchill.
I bring you greetings from the South, from the Colorado chapter of the American Indian Movement, which I'm part of. I am from Orthodoxy, otherwise known as Leonard Peltier, who tonight, as I speak to you, unfortunately, continues to sit in a cage, federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Not for anything anybody, including even his prosecutor, has been prepared to say. With certainty, they know he did, but rather as a symbol of the arbitrary ability of the federal government of the United States to repress the legitimate aspirations of indigenous people to liberation within its claimed boundaries. Big difference between a claim and reality. The claimed boundaries of the United States do not coincide with reality, do not coincide with the rights of indigenous people. Do not coincide with a lot of things, actually. And that accounts for why Leonard's in the cage. My goodness. Leave the rest for later. Leonard's part of something the United States denies. The United States denies that there are political prisoners within its facilities. It denies that it has a political prison per se in Florence, Colorado. Leonard Peltier, they say, despite the fact that there's evidence to the contrary, that would be insurmountable in any other case and would have sent it back to trial. Leonard Peltier is not in prison for political reasons, they say. He's in prison for killing 2 FBI agents. case has never been made. The case that was just mentioned, we're going to have a techno evening, I can tell. Technological devices popping up all over the place. The case that was just mentioned in the San Francisco 8 is very important for several reasons. Not least because the fate of the 8 individuals that have been targeted is in the balance. But it's a test being run by the federal government down there right now to determine whether or not they can't use evidence based on torture to legitimate torture, to make torture standard practice of interrogation. This case has already been tossed out 2 different judicial venues because it branches off in several directions on the basis that torture is unconstitutional and contravenes a number of international covenants having to do with human rights. There is in fact a convention prohibiting the use of torture for any purpose. This one clearly is, that's conceded. It's a matter of record. The state acknowledges the fact that torture did occur and are nonetheless taking the case to trial. And if they're able to take it through a judicial process, whether they obtain convictions or not, they just voided all that prohibition on torture. And that gives them license to apply it for their own purposes, upon whomever, whenever, for whatever purpose they want. Now, if you think about it, although torture certainly occurs in institutions both in the United States and Canada, and it has all along, there has been a constraint in the fact that it's not been legitimate, that you can void your prosecution, that several things could happen that's adverse to the interests of the state if it's disclosed that torture has occurred, but now they're basically to reverse that. That's heavy. But it's also part of a broader campaign that's going on primarily in the States. I'm not sure about up here. I've not heard of anything. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But in the States, they're resuscitating, dusting off these ancient cases that haven't been talked about. Couldn't be proven in the day. But they think now with lapse of time and the disarray of oppositional movements, they can perhaps get convictions, and it's part of a rewriting of history to nullify the legacies of movements that were vibrant, that were promising, from which much could be learned now. The anti-imperialist movement, as was talked about, the anti-racist movement. I don't know what an anti-war movement exactly would be, since we're in a state of war and we support one side or the other. And I'm talking about domestically, I'm not talking about out there halfway around the world. We can get into that as well. Might as well be anti-sky or anti-water as to be anti-war. It's sort of anti your environment. You might want to achieve peace, but it's going to require a struggle to accomplish that. And so the vacuousness of definition probably ought to be abandoned, and that's something we're going to be talking about tonight. The whole notion of Holocaust denial as academic orthodoxy is right on target in terms of the deformity of consciousness to allow things which are absolutely indefensible to be defended, and therefore perpetuated, that are absolutely unjustifiable to be rationalized and thus justified and perpetuated. Martin J. Lifton and the late Eric Markuson, who studied the phenomena of genocide, which has been called the incomparable crime. I mean, that's the top of the heap. That's the worst you can engage in. There are those who would argue that aggressive war might be worse. I'm not going to debate the point. Neither one of them is something that I think ought to be endorsed or embraced, and I don't think most people endorse or embrace them, although all too many of us, present speaker included, have participated in them. Various points. You're sucked into it by social circumstance, you're sucked into it by indoctrination, you're sucked into it by a deformity of reality that passes itself off as education, is delivered in the form of indoctrination to make up seem to be down, black seem to be white, in seem to be out, and so on. But we need to go to the core of this particular one because it is the environment most immediately that we inhabit.